Now, from the Pope John Paul II Cultural Center in Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the World Over Live. After 2 weeks of nasty winter weather, here we are in Washington, D.C. We're so glad to be back. This week, the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom was accused of religious bias against Muslims. We'll talk about the charge and the coverage with Nina Shea, a member of the commission. And later, a new Pew study suggests that young people aged 18 to 29 are less religious than their parents' and grandparents' generations. We'll analyze and tell you what it means to vocations and our culture with a Nashville Dominican sister and school principal, Sister Ann Catherine. And more about the Mother Angelica Book Contest. If you have a question or comment, call us 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. or internationally, 205-271-2980, or drop us a line at worldover@ewtn.com. But first, here's the brief. News from the world over this week. Healthcare reform is alive and kicking in Washington, D.C. The New York Times is reporting that President Barack Obama will offer Congress his own comprehensive healthcare legislation package in the coming days. Obama's overhaul package is expected to cost $900 billion and bridge the gap between the House and Senate versions already passed by the respective Democratic majorities. However, Democrats on Capitol Hill are unclear on how the president will handle abortion funding, which is explicitly prohibited in the House bill. Lacking a filibuster-proof Democrat supermajority, the president will use a procedure in the Senate's legislative budget process that would only require a simple majority and no GOP votes for passage of his bill. A bipartisan health care summit is planned for this coming Thursday. And staying on health care, an Oregon bishop has ended the Catholic Church's sponsorship of a hospital after its board of directors refused to suspend use of a surgical birth control procedure. Bishop Robert Vasa of the Diocese of Baker announced his decision Tuesday after concluding that years of negotiating were at an impasse with the St. Charles Medical Center in the city of Bend. It ends a 92-year relationship between the hospital and the church. Bishop Vasa said the decision, I'm responsible for attesting to the full Catholicity of the hospitals in my diocese, and I've reached the conclusion that I can no longer attest to the Catholicity of St. Charles, end quote. And in light of the pending gay marriage law here in the District of Columbia, the Archdiocese of Washington announced on Tuesday that Catholic Charities has ended its foster care and adoption program. The new D.C. law would have forced Catholic Charities to serve same-sex couples seeking to foster or adopt children. This is the third diocese that has suspended foster care adoption programs over homosexual placement requirements. The other dioceses include Boston and San Francisco. And a lot of news coming out of the Vatican this week. On the eve of Lent, the Holy Father held an unprecedented two-day summit with the bishops of Ireland to discuss the Church's sex abuse crisis there. It was his second meeting in just over 2 months with Irish prelates. The Irish Church has been rocked by 2 government reports documenting decades of abuse and cover-ups. Of the scandal, Pope Benedict reiterated the need to heal victims and to ensure that children are protected going forward. Cardinal Archbishop of Armagh and Primate of all Ireland, Sean Brady, spoke frankly about the abuse scandal after the papal meeting.
There have been failures, of course, in our leadership, and as one of the victims told us down in Maynooth, the only way we will regain that credibility would be through our humiliation. That is what we are setting out to do. Tomorrow is the beginning of Lent. It's the time of penance, and we must begin with ourselves.
And some important clarifications were recently offered by the Vatican with regard to the celebration of the extraordinary form of the Mass, known to many as the traditional Latin Mass. In response to questions from a Polish diocese, the Ecclesia Dei Commission says it is up to the priest to determine whether and when to celebrate the traditional Roman rite, as prescribed by Pope Benedict's 2007 papal directive, Summorum Pontificum. The edict abolished the need for priests to get special permission from their local bishop in order to celebrate the Mass. The Commission further emphasized the right of the faithful to have access to this form of the Mass. As a result, the Vatican clarification permits the replacement of any regularly scheduled Sunday Mass in the vernacular with the traditional Latin Mass. Many dioceses worldwide have been slow to implement Summorum Pontificum, with reports of many bishops deliberately stalling the papal directive. And Australia is getting its first saint. Pope Benedict on Friday announced that Melbourne native Mother Mary MacKillop will be canonized. Mother MacKillop founded the Congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph. The order built dozens of schools, orphanages, and clinics for the impoverished across the outback in the late 1800s. She's widely credited for spreading Catholicism across Australia. Pope Benedict visited the tomb of Mother MacKillop back during World Youth Day in 2008. The canonization Mass is set for October 17th in Rome. And this past week in the desert of Arizona, the Poor Clares of Perpetual Adoration raised their chapel dome of their yet-to-be-completed Our Lady of Solitude Monastery. The cross atop the 12-ton dome sits some 75 feet above the desert floor and can be seen for miles. The construction of the monastery has been 5 years in the making. After an invitation of Phoenix Bishop Thomas Olmsted, and with the blessing of Mother Angelica, 5 of her nuns set off from her Alabama monastery to build a new cloistered foundation in Phoenix, or outside of Phoenix. They still have a ways to go before construction is complete. Please keep them in your prayers, and you can find out more about their efforts and how you can help the nuns at their website, desertnuns.com. And speaking of nuns, a historian sent me a piece of video I want to share with you this week. It is a speech by former President Ronald Reagan that apparently is not even in the collection at the Reagan Library. In 1988, Reagan addressed a youth conference on evangelization here in D.C., and the address has been posted on a website called ronaldreagansfaith.com. Now listen to this excerpt of the great communicator recognizing someone we all know very well.
An overwhelming 9 out of 10 Americans pray. Audiences for religious books are growing. The modern communications media are being used for evangelism. Just consider, for example, the videotapes made by Youth for Christ, or the wonderful programming on a new cable channel called Eternal Word Television, a channel started by a woman of immense determination and joy, a nun called Mother Angelica. I was struck when in my reading...
Isn't that something? I had to show that to her, and I know she's watching tonight, so there you go. And as long as we're talking about Mother, an all-new Mother Angelica book, The Prayers and Personal Devotions of Mother Angelica, will be published on March 2nd. This treasure of a book contains Mother's handwritten prayers, timeless devotions. It's one of those books you'll want to have, particularly during Lent. I should know I edited it. Took me many, many months. You can pre-order your copies from Amazon or through the EWTN Religious Catalog. And this is the last week of our contest. Now, if you correctly answer this question, you will receive a signed copy of a first edition of the book along with a special bookmark. Here's the question. What devotion to Jesus did Mother Angelica pray before entering the cloister? Now, we have received more than 1,000 emails, and only a handful of them have been correct. So I'm going to give you another little hint. It is not the Stations of the Cross, but the devotion is related to the suffering of Jesus, and it is not identified in my biography of Mother Angelica, so don't go looking. Send your answers to Raymond@RaymondArroyo.com and include your name, address, and phone number so we can contact you should you win. Details about the book and the contest are at RaymondArroyo.com, and we'll announce the answer in a couple of weeks.